Hello, Toby. It's Jonn Elledge again. Or possibly it's Jonn Elledge before. I don't know when on the podcast you're going to put this. But either way, it's me from the future as far as the me and the rest of the show is concerned, because it was recorded some time ago. And I just wanted to do some updated self-promotion because I have a new book out at the end of April called History of the World in 47 Borders. The stories behind the lines on our maps, which is, as the name suggests, it's not quite a sort of full history of the world. I'm going to be honest. There are bits of world history I don't manage to cover, but it does tell the stories of borders and boundaries and other lines drawn by human beings, starting with the unification of ancient Egypt in about 3000 BC, and ending with a debate about where space begins. In between, I talk about the Great Wall of China, the partition of India. I look at the Roman Empire and how it had a civil war because of the need to defend its own borders. I visit Bala, the town in the Netherlands, which has lots of bits of Belgium inside it. I explain the Schleswig-Holstein question, try to become the fourth person ever to understand that. I talk about the Holy Roman Empire and why Voltaire was wrong. I look at the time Google Maps was implicated in what nearly turned into a war in Central America. It's all kinds of crazy stuff all over the world. And it's out at the end of April, and I'm very excited, and I hope maybe someone out there will buy it. It should be available in all good bookshops, and also probably some quite bad ones too. It'll be available in evil bookshops. Anyway, that's enough of me. Back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Well, I haven't got world enough and time to go into too much detail. Suffice to say, I'm Toby Hadoke. This is my Doctor Who podcast, Happy Times and Places, in which I watch a Doctor Who episode and try to guess what my special guests' favourite things about it are, whilst the while commentating and observing and being generally nice.
Hey Toby, it's Jonn Elledge here. I'm a writer and a journalist. For many years I worked at the New Statesman, where I am still a columnist, and getting professionally angry about the government and all the terrible things they've spent the last 12 years doing to us. I'm also the author of two books and counting. The first is the Compendium of Not Quite Everything, which is like one of those books which tries to distill all human knowledge into 300 pages with jokes, which is the ideal Christmas present for your dad or any curious children that happen to be in your life. The other of which is co-written with the lovely Tom Phillips and is called Conspiracy, A History of Bollocks Theories and How Not to Fall for Them. But despite being obviously this incredibly impressive, towering, really, literary figure at this stage in my career, probably at any given time, about 30% of my brain is given over to Doctor Who, which is something I've been increasingly open about in recent years as we've all been allowed to come out of the TARDIS. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. I mean, I've consumed my self-hatred for that. But among my other projects, I have watched the entire series from start to finish, beginning with An Unearthly Child, ending with The Power of the Doctor over about 3.5 years, and I'm writing a blog about it called A Misadventure in Space and Time, where you can find slightly deranged thoughts on every, or it will be every Doctor Who story there's ever been so far. I'm at time of recording. I'm up to the mutants in the old series and the beast below in the new. But I imagine by the time this comes out, it'll be rather further on. Anyway, that's who I am. And the story I'm going to talk about today is the season 10 finale from 2017. Starring Peter Capaldi and friends, World Enough and Time and The Doctor Falls.
Oh, this is so exciting. Hello, everybody. It's Toby here, the usual voice you hear at Happy Times and Places. The introduction was from an unusual voice because, of course, the guest is always somebody new and fresh in order to dilute the the otherwise 100% proof wayward geekery that, stuttering artifacts, interrupted segues, occasionally not quite watertight metaphors that I bring to proceedings, but do you know what? I make up for it with bucket loads of enthusiasm and a healthy dose of self-loathing. But it was nice to see John there had a little bit of self-loathing, hating himself for saying that he'd come out of the TARDIS, because John is one of those people whose writing I read, and he's a proper writer. And interesting, a very fine political commentator as well. And I always admire that. I've long, when I was younger, I thought, it must be amazing to be able to put your opinion in newspapers and things. Now I can't think of anything more ghastly, because, of course, when you put your opinion, you're inviting others to then disagree with it. And I just want to have a chat. I'm nothing like as strident as I used to be, but partially because, I look around, I woke up one morning with the expressible joy of realizing that actually I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and much of what I have to say is largely ill-informed and pointless, which is why I've dedicated myself instead to talking about something at least I have anecdotal evidence of experiencing, which is every single episode of Doctor Who. But John, and I've only met John once, but I've heard him broadcast. I've read him. He's a proper clever bloke, and a man of firm and well put opinions. So somebody who can really grapple with things. So I'm very excited by that. But it was also, as I say, interesting to hear him, express a little bit of self-loathing, because I think anybody that does anything like this, I think can sometimes be open to, being thought of as being extremely confident and full of ourselves. And I see that happen a lot with sort of commentators, that the idea that we might put an opinion forward would be that we're, as I say, that we're, full to the brim with conceit. The reason a lot of people say stuff out loud publicly for a living, or in this case, for larks, is not because they think what they're saying is interesting. It's that they hope it is, and they continually keep doing it to put that theory to the test, and I hope that it's correct. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Listen, John is somebody whose opinions will be very worth listening to on an episode that I haven't seen more than, I should think 2 or 3 times. So unlike when we do the classic show, where I've probably met some of the actors. If I haven't met them, I wrote their obituary, and if not, I saw them in a production of Love's Labour's Lost in Milton Keynes or some such. Who knows where we will go with this. I did watch this about a month ago because I knew I had it coming up, and I wanted to at least sort of prepare myself and see if I would be able to think of enough things to say. And so much time has passed now that I can't kind of remember what. Well, I have a vague memory of what my feelings were having watched them, which were actually quite positive. And I do, and it's funny. I think I probably don't revisit the Moffat era as much as I should, or haven't, or maybe it's just that I need a bit of time between, because I've been watching a lot of Russell T stuff recently, and maybe that's because of the second coming, as it were. But it's nice because it means, and actually I found this with the classic series now too, there was a time, and it was around the time of Rose, where everything I plucked off the video, as it was then, all my Doctor Who's were on VHS. And it's just like, I know all of this stuff so well, I kind of am not in the mood to watch it. I need something new. Thank heavens Doctor Who came back. Whereas now there's some classic series stuff that I, would be quite refreshing if I saw it, because I haven't seen it for ages, even though I'm very familiar with it. But, I feel there are certain eras of the modern iteration of the show where, one can go back and, have a vague sense of what you think about it. Oh, I like that one. Oh, that was a bit disappointing. Or, I remember that one being really exciting. But not to the extent that, I can sort of quote from it or remember performances, beyond the obvious ones. So I really enjoyed revisiting this. So that's the headline. But So why had I not revisited it up to that point? Was it something to do with the episodes, or just to do with putting some distance between it before I could watch it for fun again? And I feel when I'm doing these podcasts that I probably need to watch these episodes for fun before I watch them for, in inverted commas, work, which is what I'm about to do now. I'm going to watch this for work. This is my work on a Monday night as my dog curls up on the sofa and my other half is away at the theatre. I have a couple of hours to myself, so what else would I do but to add to my podcast bank? So I am going to ask you to get ready to watch with me the first of this sort of season finale, World Enough and Time. What a beautiful title. And we will press play in 3, 2, 1. And so we have literally a cold open because it's in the freezing Antarctic, and I love this. I do like snow. I find snow extremely atmospheric. And of course, this has a beautiful payoff at the end of the two-parter, but let's not get into that yet. And we know as viewers, we're approaching the end of the Capaldi era. He's got such a marvelous face. But this is a brilliant opening, and I love this snowy set. It's one of those ones where one kind of knows it's a studio, but it's a studio that is nonetheless doing its job. You have that thing as an audience where I can sort of see that's a studio, and yet it's convincing me that it's outside, and I like that. I think it's well rendered. That World Enough and Time is a beautiful title. I like these titles too. It's a 17th century poem, isn't it? Andrew Marvell. Had we but world enough and time, this queeness lady were no crime. And it's basically, isn't it, about if we weren't shackled by the short lifespan that is all we're given, you might not be in such a hurry to sort out unrequited love. And I find as I get older, that speaks more and more that, I've just turned 50. I'm over halfway through and I'm, heading in the wrong direction. And friends are dying off. So now not only does that time beautifully with the Marvel poem, but also with the idea of Cybermen, the idea of prolonging life, of getting rid of disease, of casting off the frailty that besets us all, and yet, our knowing of our finite lifespan kind of defines us as well, isn't it? We're the only animal that knows it's going to die. But I find that, really fascinating and chilling and humbling and altogether quite sad as well, because death is, I'm not a religious person. Death is the end. It is the, out brief candle, and it's gone. Anyway, I'm sure we'll. I love Michelle Gomez, who I think is absolutely brilliant. I never imagined The Master could be like this, and yet it absolutely works. And what they've done is they've done a bit of star casting. They've brought an actress, I don't know which she prefers, people prefer different things, who brings their own special energy and personality. And she's one of those actors, isn't she, who you give her a scene and she'll do the lines well, and she will bring another dimension to it. And she's sparky and she's crazy, but she also she does the drama too, and she brings a sadness to it, as well as a danger and a psychotic element. I think she's brilliant. Nobody will ever quite beat Delgado for me, just because I remember being amazed at how good he was when I first saw him, having read about him, and I think he's my ideal master. But I think she is terrific. The Doctor Who joke interests me because it's annoying and it's funny and it's almost going to the place that I would be too cowardly. I will refer to Peter Capaldi playing Doctor Who, and I know that people will go, "It's actually the Doctor," and I don't mean to annoy anybody. Well, no, maybe I do, because I sort of think, "Oh, come on, you know that I know the character's not really called Doctor Who, although it could be called Doctor Who because it's credited as Doctor Who up until the end of the Tom Baker era, and it's called Doctor Who in the War Machines, blah, blah, blah. But we've come up with a reason why the War Machines might be a mistake. It's Votan not knowing the Doctor's surname, so putting Who like it would say, Doug Who or whatever, if it only knew somebody's first name or title or whatever. But but an exposition and comic relief is, that's quite meta and quite arch, and I understand people for whom that is an arched eyebrow too far. I rather like it. My sense of humour is quite similar, I think, to Stephen Moffat's. But there's also an element of that goes, but I can handle it. What kind of show? It conflicts me, I guess. The Doctor Who thing is, but it's a bit like calling the pilot the pilot. It's almost like it's there to mess with people like me who don't want there to be two things called the pilot. Do you know what I mean? I don't want them to say, I love the way she goes into Scottish as well. It's his real name. And what he's doing there is he's going, oh, she's just larking around, and then she's throwing it and going, no, that's actually what he's called. And I'm sort of going, oh, he's just doing it as a joke. No, he's not. He's saying it's the thing. And it sort of is kind of there to sort of needle me. And I understand, not me, it's not all about me, but you know what I mean. And I understand that sense of humour. I remember once I greeted my mum after she'd had a long train journey, and she'd had her phone switched off. And so the first thing I said to her was, well, that's brilliant, isn't it? Have your blooming phone turned off. That was sensible. She was like, for God's sake, I've just been on a long train. Now, I thought I was just being funny and arch, and I was sort of going, because I wasn't appreciating. I thought I was teasing on a level, whereas she thought I was sort of getting at her. Whereas I suspect Stephen Moffat is just going, I'm just, I'm having a laugh, I'm playing with this idea. But there's part of me that takes it as, no, you're doing it to deliberately annoy me, aren't you? Now, we do that. I've just watched something actually where people have got very cross with something in a YouTube video, where they're definitely imputing the motives of the person that they're criticising and making a great leap and go, well, they said that because they want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going, no, I don't think they did. I think they were just trying to be funny. But as Doctor Who fans, there's part of me that thinks Stephen Moffat is going, yeah, I'm going to wind up all the people that get angry at the suggestion the Doctor's called Doctor Who, in the same way that I'll call this the pilot in order to annoy people who only want things to be called the one thing. Now, it may not be as deliberately provoking as that. But why do I think it might be? I don't know. But it means it's a joke that I vacillate between liking and being really cross with. But only in a way that I find interesting rather than in a way I find annoying, I think. There's a real sense of danger to this scene. I think this actor is very good. Oliver Lansley, isn't it? Yeah, Oliver Lansley is excellent. We've seen in a few things. He was Kenny Everett on the BBC's thing. They had a period where they made sort of biopics of famous people from my childhood. And I think he does a very, very good job of this. I think Peter Capaldi is excellent in this scene. But I know what's about to happen. And I remember when I watched this about a month ago, I was going, oh, well, it can't happen here then, because it wouldn't come out of nowhere. And it does. I know we now have Bill for the rest of this story, and there are ways of keeping her alive. But this is Bill's death scene. And as a death for a companion, and I'm watching this on a big screen, and the close-ups, the use of the actors' faces here are magnificent. And this is a real shock. She has WoW on her jacket, but that is horrible and a brilliant piece of direction. And I know we're now going to play this out and tell the story in a non-linear fashion, and that's really interesting. And I do like this sort of collegiate setting they have for this, and I think it's an attempt to, mix things up a little bit. And I really like the setup of this season, actually. And I really like Bill Potts. And I felt I got very cross with the tabloids who, because she's, there was lots of brouhaha about her being a not heterosexual character of colour. And so, lots of tabloids go, oh, Doctor Who's going woke. I don't know if the word woke had been invented then. Was it politically correct then? Same shit, different uniform. But then, of course, when because I presume because Capaldi was going and because Moffat was going, they wanted to leave the whole of the TARDIS crew were destined to leave at the end of this season anyway. But then, of course, the tabloids would be like, oh yeah, this politically correct figurehead isn't even going to last the season. Well, I suspect that was probably the plan from the beginning. It's not that they suddenly went, yeah, because politically correct is bad, isn't it? So let's get rid. And I think that's a cruel implication to a blameless actress. And I didn't like any of that sort of discourse in the papers where they use their own prejudices to sort of talk of her as a sort of failed experiment before she'd even started, which reflected badly on her, when actually it's more likely that this was a companion with a finite shelf life because a whole era was coming to an end. And I really like this TARDIS team. I think Matt Lucas slots in very nicely. And those characters, that are essentially comic relief characters, can be slightly jarring and if not judged right. And I actually think he fits in seamlessly. And I like this kind of the Doctor on a bench with a takeaway stuff. It's and we're bringing in what are we talking about here? Yes, petty humorous obsession with gender and its associated stereotypes, which of course opens a huge can of worms. But it was Stephen Moffat himself who, he's already, changed. We've already had that in Doctor Who, haven't we? We've had the changing of the General from Ken Bones into Tania Miller. So the series has already sort of done that, and I think it's grappling with modern ideas and looking at them through the looking at the society that the drama is being portrayed in. And I think that's looking at it from a detached alien shapeshifter's point of view, that that does put a different perspective on it. I think it's interesting. I can equally understand people who don't want the show to go there at all and just to be escapist tea time entertainment. But of course, sometimes I think what we think of as something that isn't political is political by its nature of not going somewhere. If you say, well, I don't want Doctor Who to do stories about issues of race because that's just political. Well, I mean, it's been doing that since day one. But that aside, to not do something that reflects the world in which we are right now, or at least discusses it, or at least gives perspective on it, is also political in a sense. It's a political statement to not engage with any of that. So I have sympathy with all of that. I don't get het up either way. For me, all I don't want Doctor Who is to be overly sexual or unsuitable for children. And I think if it does politics, I don't want it to be particularly prescriptive. I want it to, if it has a message, to put that forward in a way that is interesting and provokes discussion, rather than hands you a leaflet, because otherwise that's boring drama actually. But anyway, that's the Doctor, and Bill discussing that. I think that was lovely character dynamics for them. I love this whole patient, emergency medicine, but almost like battlefield emergency medicine, and it's sort of analog, with the drip and all of that. It reminds me a bit of the sort of the gas mask soldier with the horse in The Deadly Assassin. Taking things from that are made up of constituent parts of our past, if you like, or even our present, and then making them seem, again, sort of slightly. They're scary because they're they're the equivalent of the old haunted castle or cobwebs or anything like that. It's taking stuff that's old, which makes it almost feel sort of haunted. And of course, now a World War I hospital does seem old. Looking at it through a modern lens, it's that's the sort of place that is haunted by ghosts and brings with it all sorts of horrifying things. I'm also not wild always about the time travel element of when Stephen Moffat does Doctor Who. I sometimes think it has its cake and eats it and paints itself into an undramatic corner, because you can do the Bill and Ted thing of, leave yourself a laser gun in a desk or whatever. And I get slightly annoyed by that, because you can make your own rules. But this, I think, the idea of the spaceship with time moving at different speeds is an absolutely excellent use of time as a storytelling conceit and as a dramatic weapon. He's very good at giving you oh my god moments, Moffat, in the scenarios that he's structured that make you go oh my god. So that means that when the Doctor realizes what's happening, suddenly becomes terrifying, and you've got that idea of the people coming up to get you, and you've also got the idea of time moving at a different speed down here for Bill and up there for them, and it's suddenly you have all sorts of really interesting storytelling possibilities with that get to the very core of the potentialities of Doctor Who. This is Paul Brightwell, who's I think a really interestingly he's an actor with a very striking physiognomy, and I just not that long seen him in The Crucible at the Royal Exchange. It was really funny, and I remember thinking, I haven't seen him in ages. Great, he's still about. And then he turned up in Doctor Who. It was either that or it was the other way around. I'd just seen him in Doctor Who and gone, oh wow, Paul Brightwell, yeah, I haven't seen him for ages. And then he turned up in The Crucible. It was one or the other. John Joe O'Neill from the 50th anniversary special was also in that production. So it would have been before this, because John Joe O'Neill, David Collings, and somebody else were in that production of The Crucible, and I interviewed Sam Cox from The Idiot's Lantern. They were all in The Crucible, and I left notes for them and ended up interviewing them all. So if Paul Brightwell had been in Doctor Who at that point, I would have left him a note too, and I didn't. So no, he was then. I noticed him being in that, and then suddenly he was in this not long after. I'm loving watching this on the big screen, and then there's a lot of extreme close-ups of Capaldi's eyes and mouth, which are terrific. Now, John Simm, this is a curious thing, isn't it? I think we knew John Simm was coming back. I'm pretty sure I did. And so when he appeared there, I kind of knew it was him, and yet a bit like the Black Dalek at the end of, because we'd seen it at the BAFTAs at the end of Army of Ghosts. And I think even with Derek Jacobi in Utopia, I kind of knew all of these. This is where spoilers are interesting, because I knew all of these things, and yet getting caught up in the episode, I was able to kind of trick myself that I didn't know. So I had two things going on at once of going, well, I know that that's the the Master and John Simm, but I also think he's doing such a convincing job of covering it up that I'm prepared to go along with the episode, even though I know what's coming, but I'm kind of pretending to myself that I don't. This is all beautiful. I love the filming of this. This is sort of Shock Corridor or the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This is either, expressionistic German film, or it's weird sort of asylum kind of. It's a congruence of both of those things. Sort of, something set in a strange institution where bad things are done to people. So it strikes me as a little bit sort of American 50s, 60s, 70s, but also, the photography and the beautiful lighting. I love that light streaming from the windows, and the design is very sort of German expressionistic silent movie-esque. So it's taking its cues from lots of different places and melding them together into something that I think is so arresting. It's also very, very Doctor Who, whilst being Doctor Who like you've never seen it before. And again, I kind of got into my head there that because I knew the Cybermen were coming. Okay, she's got a chest unit there, so that's not going to be a surprise to me. But again, it's so convincingly done. This idea of sort of half-formed, as they'll turn out to be, Cybermen, as sort of damaged patients, and there's something horrible about a drip. There's just something really unpleasant about a drip. There's something, that you can feel it, and you know that you don't want to pull it out because that would be painful. There's something really viscerally sort of physical about that. But isn't this, it's people wearing rubber gloves saying one word through a kind of speak and spell machine with blank faces caused by, stockings. Simple. And yet the manipulation of those 3 or 4 simple, recognisable things into something rather haunting and creepy, I think is extremely good work. I love what John Simm does here, because I don't think you can tell it's him. There's one moment in the episode where there's a bit of a close-up of him, and he does a sort of facial expression where there's a bit of the John Simm I know creeping through there. But otherwise, I think I was looking. Otherwise, I think he has a lot of fun with it, but he's not sending it up, and he's doing that wonderful thing that you like to see good actors do, is completely disguise themselves. It's no Sir Gilles Lestrade, do you know what I mean? You insult the patients. And again, I think Stephen Moffat has a really smart way of finding a concept in Doctor Who, or a creature in Doctor Who that we're all familiar with, and doing something with it that is true to it, and yet gives it a new dimension, and a particularly good creepy dimension. We often talk about the sassy dialogue of Moffat, or the timey-wimey of Moffat, and yet I think his greatest strength to me is his ability to really disturb using the familiar, to tap into childhood nightmares. And I actually think he does that better than anybody. And I love all this special effects stuff as well. This is all beautifully done. But the sort of horror hospital thing, this is terrifying. And it's just a rubber glove. But there's something about hospitals, isn't there? I've just been recently watching Greatest Show. There's something about circuses that are creepy. There is something creepy about hospitals. You can kind of smell this if you want. If you were doing a sensory version of this, you'd be feeding carbolic through the carbolic smell through the speakers or whatever. But we still got to remember that Bill is now essentially dead, having been killed just because a man wanted to stop people coming up in a lift. He killed her for that, which seems such a sort of cruel and casual death. Now, obviously, the programme gives the actress and the character stuff from her point of view, so the journey lands a little bit more. But if you just divorce the death from its continuation and her continuation in the series for the next 2 episodes. That's a pretty nothing death, isn't it? It's a pretty, and that's the point. I'm not saying, I'm not saying it's a wasted opportunity. I'm saying it's deliberately kind of, or casual is wrong, but it's deliberately sort of blunt. It's terrific. I love all this production design because, again, I think a lot of modern Doctor Who does this very well, is that instead of gleaming spaceships, you have this kind of retro, and I see that as fairly Philip Hinchcliffe era-esque as well, where a space bag would actually be a leather medical bag, or that the Barry Newbury wood panel TARDIS as well, the secondary control room, where instead of trying to be gleaming and futuristic, which, as we know, always dates you and always gets you into trouble, if you do a bit of sort of cyberpunky retro, future retro, well, I think gives it a bit more of a sort of classy atmosphere, if you like. Wooden paneling is also always going to seem sort of classier than silver panels. I don't know why, because maybe it seems more literary. So maybe it's only more appealing to snobs. I don't know. Although we can do sort of clean white minimalism as well. Yeah, I love the new TARDIS, for example, which so it seems so sort of fresh and clean and exciting. A word for Pearl Mackie, who I think is brilliant. She has such a sort of naturalistic delivery and a kind of modern vibe about her, and I sound like 100-year-old man when I say that, but that to me is exactly what I don't want the Doctor Who to seem sort of self-consciously modern and cool, because I think, again, that dates like current technology. But when you get somebody who's a sort of perky, earthy character, this to me makes Doctor Who seem more real, because she seems to me an authentic depiction of today's younger people, and I think then that channels that does what the companion should be doing, be the identification figure, totemic of the time that the program is being made in, which is why I tend to think that companions from the modern day are really, really helpful conduits for the audience. Obviously there are exceptions to break the rule, because we love Leela. This is a great scene. And you have to do the exposition, but and I have to say, by the way, the blue-balled alien look, I think, is a great, simple look that does the job. And I know that there've been a few of them in the series recently, but green had become such a cliche. Why, Terrence Dicks, the colour of monsters is blue these days. But I think our colour palette for aliens has moved around a bit. She's so. Oh, she's wearing a woolly jumper. The lighting here is extraordinary, isn't it? There's brilliant use of light and shadow. That streaming warm light coming in, and yet it's still dark and atmospheric. And that's scary, isn't it? She's trapped in. And, I mean, we kind of know she's got a chest unit, don't we? We can kind of see that coming. And yet that's the tragedy. I mean, that's the whole thing about a lot of this, is that actually it's the inevitability. It's with knowing that John Simm, that actually helps go, well, I know something terrible is happening. I sort of know the nature of the something terrible that's happening. I quite like the rapport that these two have. I think it's quite sweet, although obviously it's got a darkness at its core. And all of this special effects work is terrific. I think this whole story looks really magnificent. But I think this central idea is absolutely fantastic. And I know we've already had, Matt Smith living out his time and Captain Jack being buried for ages, and but I think this iteration of it works really well because you've got the two different sets of characters in very close proximity, moving at completely different speeds, which means it's a race against time, but one set of protagonists is racing through treacle, which I think gives really mixes it up and stuff, and I love that. I love that look and the oh dear, sorry, I've just I think this is a really good use of the timey-wimey. And of course, at the moment you're just going, there's lots of life forms and they're just little dots. But that is a planting of a seed of something that is going to be gobsmackingly terrifying in about 10-15 minutes time. As we're solving the mystery, we're being given clues that pay off to this, I think, extraordinary climax that we get. But the other, let's also not ignore the fact that what they're bringing to the fore here, what they're bringing back, what these sort of spooky silhouettes, and I haven't looked, but I'm presuming there's a bit of Ailsa Burke choreography. But if not, there's something great about the shambling gait of these creatures, which is, odd and strange and strangely moving and yet unsettling at the same time. Anything that's a parody of the human form is, of course, slightly unsettling. And that includes the movement, and that slightly sort of shambling movement gives them an aspect of being like the Walking Dead. And anything that is us through a slightly shattered lens disturbs us. It's scarier to be a slightly sort of misshapen, if you like, version of ourselves than something that's totally not like us at all. And that speaks to why people who are disabled have often been prejudiced against because they're nearly but not quite, in inverted commas, normally shaped or whatever. And we don't like things that are slightly malformed versions of the ideal, and that speaks to a deep-seated primal, almost scarily sort of, it's a primal force because to propagate your species, things should be, perfect, again in inverted commas, and so it speaks to a sort of primal evolutionary drive that if it overcomes our reason, it makes us prejudiced, but it also makes us, we're therefore wired to be scared a little bit, which I find really fascinating. Because we are all deep down, we're creatures of instinct, and what civilization is about is sometimes, identifying what we might shrink away from and going, well, is that an instinct that we no longer need because we don't live in a situation where that instinct will, keep us alive out in the wild where we don't live anymore or whatever. And of course, poor old Bill really goes through it in this, and it's a horrible way for her to leave. And I know we do, we we managed to get a sort of happy ending, but let's discuss that. Love that. That was a really sort of skew-if camera move there up to the hospital window. There's a real sense of scale about the outside that I think is very good. A bit of nice reference to Venusian Aikido, of course, which any John Pertwee fan will be delighted by, and that's always nice to have a reference to the olden days. And you can just, you can see the light shining through her chest unit there. But yes, let's not forget. 10 minutes and years. And they've given themselves a get out. I can't use the TARDIS, so that's handy. And there's nothing wrong with that, with inventing your own rule to stop you doing why can't they just do this? That's always a useful. It's like even the sonic screwdriver can't get me out of this one. I can control the TARDIS, but only when it would not be a cheat to tell the story using it. And I think the idea of bringing John Simm back was a fabulous one. She's so good. She's so good. And I love the dynamic that these two have. You really do feel that they've been, down here all of this time. That's a nice little bit of. You thought it was getting a bit sentimental there. It hurts my heart. No, it's because you're digging into me, and the balance of the sort of humour and the unsettling and the nice and the nasty. It's all going on here. I think this is a really, really stunning episode of Doctor Who. It's my burgling mask, just in case. But look at that light streaming through the window and then from the torch. It's beautiful.
Where did you get that? I have looked at these girls. They don't let just anyone with a mess like this, I also have key to operating theatre.
But it's great. It's a bit like sort of creeping around the school after the teachers have gone away. It speaks to that. Again, he's very good at kind of producing things that have and when I say primal, I mean, like when we were at school. And because of course, he's already had the Cybermen as, reanimated corpses and bursting out of graves, which is pretty grim. But here the idea that they're, this is the genesis of cyber technology, and it's like a sort of mobile hospital kind of thing. Paul Brightwell, he's one of those actors that in the 80s he'd have probably been your lead baddie or something, and here he doesn't do much at all, and it's because really good experienced actors will come in and do a couple of days or even one scene of Doctor Who, but he's got a brilliant face, hasn't he? There's an actor, he reminds me of an actor from the 70s and 80s called John Golightly, who played a lot of Nazis or village weirdos. He's not unlike John Golightly at all, actually. But he's got a great face for this kind of abstract film noir, expressionistic feel. And this tapping into the primitive nature of the early Cybermen and not making it a shortcoming, I think is really good. There was a time when bringing back the original Cybermen design would have been seen as a ludicrous idea, and that the reason that they were changed straight away is because we love the Cybermen, but the first ones, I mean, even in 30 Years in the TARDIS, don't they say they were rather absurd creatures? And they did bring them back in Doctor Who magazine. I remember in the Junkyard Demon, there was something really scary about having them there. And then I remember I was in a thing that Big Finish did called Cyberman 2, And I had a scene where I had to, I think, listen to some recordings, and the character I played was Captain Louis Richter, and and that voice came through, and I remember the hairs went up on the back of my neck, and I thought, oh no, they are really scary. And I'd always kind of liked them, but in the same way that I sort of went, well, yeah, I can handle it. People do this. We all do this, don't we? Yeah, well, I can handle it, but other people would think it was awful. I can see, I'm a Doctor Who fan. I see a body horror where other people see sellotape. But the idea that the general public might see what has now been described, what is now called a Mondassian Cyberman, and do anything other than guffaw and go, well, what we need is, sleek, skin tight, streamlined figures, not these crinkly suited sock face men. But so to take all of that and to rationalize it and to turn those relics from the past into something disturbing and weird and horrific, I think is a stroke of absolute genius. And I was talking through the arrival of John Simm here behind Michelle Gomez, and she's being funny with the person that she would kill in a blink, because she doesn't realize it's a previous incarnation of herself. But suddenly you get these two and I love the way she sort of issues her threats without being arch about it. She's very casual and cruel, but as I say, she never sends it up. There's always an intensity and an edge to her humour, and I think the dynamic, and we'll have more of it next week, between these two masters. We've had loads of multi-Doctor stories, but a multi-master story on television is again, it's a way of taking something that is bleeding obvious, except it wasn't bleeding obvious to me until they'd done it. I never thought, yeah, that's what we should have, a two-master story. And it's an absolute joy. This is amazing. This is Doctor Who in a nutshell. Just a monster costume that is reliant on a few lights here and there in the shadows. It's standing up, but we see it from looking at the Doctor, so we get the tallness because the camera goes up. The camera work in this is fabulous. Rachel Talalay, I think, directs this stuff absolutely terrifically. There is some fun to be had with the idea that the Doctor's going, a Mondassian Cybermen, and the general public are going, what? But it doesn't matter, because Capaldi does it with such intensity. All you need to know, all that needs to say to you is, because I saw a few people mocking that idea online, but what it's basically saying to people who aren't sort of well versed in Doctor Who lore, okay, so they're a Cyberman, but they're a different kind. Okay, right. And I think the rest of the story has shown that what it means is it's a primitive kind. It's the fledgling Cyberman. And look at that. There's something about the blank facedness that is, and the fact that it has the echoes of those patients that makes that it's like Frankenstein's monster. There's a fearsomeness and a melancholy and nowadays vampires are sad too, ghosts are sad, and that gives an extra dimension to what as a kid had been a much more two-dimensional threat, which is they're the scary things that are scary. And of course we, the audience, are just a couple of steps ahead, and we're going, oh no, Christ, that's Bill Potts. And I love the way that we have this double whammy of both the Doctor and the Master, and I love the fact that he's got the goatee. The Doctor and the Master are having the main revelation at the same time. We suddenly got two protagonists getting a WTF moment, the Master and the Doctor. I am Bill Potts. Oh God, it's so tragic. And we've got that music refrain as well, which which echoes Last of the Time Lords. This is so sad. Oh. And there's something impassive about that face too. Oh, it's so sad. And what I love about Michelle Gomez as well is that she can be sort of touching and empathic, but then she's never far away from being cruel and the master, because she is. It's not like the humanizing effect. I mean, I know ultimately next week it does, but she still does. But she's still horrible. She's horrible here. You know, there's no. So you go, oh, okay, they've toyed with her being nice, but oh, now that there's two of them, strength in numbers, she's gonna put that all. She's gonna kick that all into touch. Oh, it's so sad. And the cliffhanger is a crying Cyberman or Cyber Bill. Isn't that? I think that's terrific. I think it's a really strange and interesting, an original episode of Doctor Who, and yet it's got so many bits where you go, oh yeah, okay, I can see why they've done that, or I can see where they're, you know, it's taking the familiar and making it weird and unsettling, and I think the pacing of it, and this is a brilliant trailer, and of course they you know, they're going to sort of relocate. I know it's in the same place, but the second part of Moffat two-parters sort of, you know, take a little bit of a jump to the side. Looking forward to watching this second episode after that very exciting trailer. But I've got to get to grips with what I've had. You'll notice it's funny. I had to. There was moments there where I didn't say anything, which I know is probably a blessed relief, but also contrary to you know what one is meant to be doing. It's because there's so much to kind of follow that one doesn't want to be missing some of the intricacies of the storytelling, because it is very intricate. You know, I'll just you know, talk about a door or something like that, and making sure that I'm getting it right, because it is quite complicated. And I was trying to remember the exact details of that. You know, about how the two different time zones worked and what was happening with Bill downstairs and what was going on with the Doctor upstairs. So what are my three favourite things about that? I mean, I could just choose any number of the regular contributors. I think Michelle Gomez is amazing. I love the idea of teaming up with the Master, but I've got a feeling I'm going to choose the Gomez Simm axis next week. I mean, I think that my favourite thing in that episode, though, is the body horror of the, you know, dripped, bandaged patients as being the antecedents of the Cybermen, and knowing that we can kind of see that they're like an echo, a shadow that we can sort of see coming, and yet without it being predictable or boring. It's that, you know, it's all deliberately done. It's all everything. I mean, especially if you've had the vague spoilers from all the previews and stuff, everything that happens in that episode I kind of knew was going to happen, and yet I was perfectly happy to be taken on the journey there, because it was almost the inevitability that was so sickening about it. And I think that the visual of those patients and them becoming, you know, those 10th planet Cybermen, which, as I say, in some eyes could be seen as, you know, absurd looking, and yet absolutely not. I think is a brilliant way of rationalizing why they might look like that, and then making the journey there terrifying unnerving and disconcerting, and everything from their body language to the and again, I love it when Doctor Who takes very simple ingredients, a stocking, some rubber gloves, and a drip, and turns it into something. The fact that they're all lined up there in that bare hospital, and the production design. Michael Pickwoad was such a good designer, such a lovely man as well, and so sad that he died. So soon after working on the show. Because I think he was game for going to all the events and stuff. He was a proper bow tie wearer. He's a bit like Doctor. In the old days, you'd have cast him as Doctor Who, not get him to design it. Lovely fella, but a really good designer. I think his work. He does that stuff where he takes classic old design and makes it futuristic by making evocative of the past. So that's sort of cyberpunky. I'm probably using the wrong phraseology, but anyway. So yeah, Cybermen as patients. That whole thing there, I love that. And I think that whole abstract, expressionistic thing is terrific. My second thing, I think, has to be the idea of that, because as I said, I do react sometimes against Doctor Who when it gets too timey-wimey. I think you should not necessarily go there most of the time, but actually that idea that you've got the two ends of the spaceship and they rationalize it because of the proximity to the black hole, where time is moving at a different pace, and enabling one part of the story to get to where it needs to, whilst the other part of the story explains to us as much as we need to before the two parts of the story converge, I think is a really smart move, and a really smart piece of storytelling, and a great way of using elements of Doctor Who's DNA, shaking them up a bit to again present something that is kind of familiar and yet unlike any episode of Doctor Who we've ever had before. And my third favourite thing, that's a tricky one. Shall I say? I like John Simm hiding in plain sight. I think he does an excellent job. I think Michelle Gomez is just so good. She judges it so well. But then again, why don't I choose her in every single episode that she's in? Because she's so good. But Capaldi is so good as well. Can I choose the sort of production design, or does that tie in with the Cybermen thing really that I've done there? And should I be bolder and go in a slightly different direction? I think. Do I like the Doctor Who joke? Because it kind of slightly annoys me, but it is very, very funny. Should I choose the Doctor Who joke just to be annoying? Because I go, but why would Stephen Moffat do that just to annoy us? Well, because there's actually something quite fun about being annoying. But because it's arch, because you're being deliberately annoying and so you don't really mean it. And because it is a bit of a showcase for that opening scene, is a great showcase for Michelle Gomez. So should we say that Doctor Who scene, but because of what Michelle Gomez brings to it, because she's such a force, she's so funny, she's so odd, but without sending it up, without being stupid, and there's always, you never lose sight of the fact that she's sad, but she's dangerous, but I think that opening Doctor Who, Missy investigating the scene, because I just think it has a balance of whimsy and strangeness and fun and Doctor Who-ness. So those are my three things: the body horror, German expressionistic film kind of vibe thing, that's going on with the Cybermen downstairs, as it were. And that encompasses the production design and the look of the Cybermen and all that beautiful streaming light and those hospital corridors, all of that whole vibe, shall we say? The excellent time passing at different rates thing going on, and and Missy playing Doctor Who. Okay. So John will now, I'm sure, be choosing extremely clever things that will make me seem like an idiot. Anyway, so what John's things, he's choosing 3 things from World, Enough and Time. Here's the first.
The first of the things I really love about World, Enough and Time comes pretty early in the episode. And it's when Peter Capaldi says, her name isn't Doctor Who, my name is Doctor Who. I have no idea if that is the character's name. I don't really think it matters. There's a few cases where it's very clearly implied that it is, especially for some reason in 1966. And the idea that Doctor Who is a particularly stupid name is very much dependent on the assumption that the Doctor is not a stupid name at all, which it obviously is. God, it's just hit me that Doctor Who is a really stupid name for a television series, isn't it? Should have thought about that at some point in the last 59 years. Anyway, I'm a sucker for stuff that's included mostly to annoy a certain type of fan. But more than that, there's a real sense of both, possibly either, but I think both, Stephen Moffat and Peter Capaldi ticking this one off their bucket list. And that Peter Capaldi wanted to go on television and say, my name is Doctor Who. And it's just lovely, and there's enough of a contrivance around it that certain type of fan, if they wanted, they can kind of pretend that it's not really true. Which as much as I like winding them up, it's always nice to have these kind of get out clauses, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually think that's kind of what I said, because it's a joke that has your cake and eats it, and if you want to go, it does enough to be annoying, but not enough to make it definitive, and so it kind of works, and so that it means it is kind of fun because it's not prescriptive, it's not bullying, it's not he's not saying it is definitively, because that would be an abuse of his power. Instead, what he's doing, he's just toying with you, which is also an abuse of his power. But I think it's meant in a benevolently humorous way, or it could be just him being very cruel with nerks like me. But as John says, it does give you a get out clause if you want one. So I think I'm going to take that, because I think we both were drawn to that. From similar directions. It's the whole Doctor Who thing, and the fact that it's potentially annoying but also quite funny and gives you the get out clause. And John didn't say this, but I think it's acceptable for me to also have thrown Michelle Gomez into the mix there. So I think I'm going to take that. I'm in an uncharacteristically generous mood with myself, partially because the chances of John choosing 1, 2, 3, because he's done 3 from World Enough in Time, 3 from the Doctor Falls, and 1 overall thing. So the chances of us getting 7 things is hugely unlikely. Let's be honest. So I'm going to start well. I'm going to start well and watch myself disintegrate from here. Number 2.
The second thing I love about World Enough and Time is also quite early in the episode. It's when, the Doctor is doing his triumphant, one day you will look back and wonder who I was speech, which, by this point in the Capaldi era and in the Moffat era, come to that. We've heard that speech many times. I think we've heard it 3 or 4 times this season, to be honest. But on this occasion, he doesn't get to finish it because he's interrupted by the blue man panicking and blowing a hole in Bill's chest about 8.5 minutes into the episode. There's a few things about this I really love. Firstly, the way this whole episode ups the ante. It begins with the Doctor falling out the TARDIS and starting to regenerate and screaming no. That's a mood, as the kids would say. There's the gorgeous opening tracking shots of the generation ship and the glimpses of the worlds inside that we're going to see, and then a black hole at the end. And then this. And all of these things serve to kind of elevate what starts as just another episode. It kind of makes it feel like, this is our finale. I mean, when was the last time that a finale story started with a portentous someone's going to die or is already dead thing? I mean, I suppose the Angels Take Manhattan, arguably before that, it's Pandorica, I suppose. And the way it comes out of nowhere just kind of gives it much more punch. It sort of reminds me, because I am like a proper old school fan, it sort of reminds me of the Caves of Androzani. There's just this sense of the Doctor having landed in a world that's too horrible for his normal tricks to work. And the result is, it's going to kill him.
That's interesting. Why didn't I choose the bit where Bill gets the middle of her blown out? Because it's horrible. It's extremely well done. The look on Pearl Mackie's face is extraordinarily sort of sad and pained and terrified. And then you pan down and you have what in any other circumstances would just be a bravura special effects shot. The fact that you can see the spaceship behind the human person who now has a hole in them, but the fact that that's the companion, and the fact that looks like a wound that nobody could ever recover from, and the fact that the companion is dead. Now, this is where I suppose Doctor Who can get can be a victim of its own actions, in that we've seen companions die and be brought back to life. That you kind of go, well, yeah, come on, we've seen terrible things happen, and it's all been all right. But I think this is actually, I mean, the fact that it's such a mortal wound and such a horrendous one. Remember, in a program that's being watched by children, it does look to me like the program is going, and we've really killed her, guys. Get out of that. But you also know that the stuff going on downstairs, that you learn pretty quickly about the the surgery and all of that. But then, of course, that brings the looming thing of what becomes the cliffhanger of, but if they're doing cyber surgery, we know that's not good. So what can save her life? It's going to open up a whole new set of problems. But and all of that is brilliantly done. So I don't know why I didn't talk about that more. But John has given me the jumping off point to do so. So I'm grateful. But I wonder why I didn't choose the hole in the stomach, because it is an extremely memorable, grim, well rendered, and I think what the kids call it today, an OMG or WTF moment. But fortunately, I'm not a kid, so I just say I think it's very good. Anyway, I didn't choose that. And John's third thing about World Enough and Time.
So before I tell you what my third thing about this episode is, I'm going to tell you that another example of the phenomenon I'm about to talk about is the film Glass Onion, the Knives Out sequel, which I just saw in the cinema, and which is an absolute joy for the exact same reason that this is, and it's that I'm just a sucker for things where the actors are clearly really enjoying themselves, and you get this. One of my favourite guest appearances in the Chibnall era is Chris Noth, playing the sort of Mr. Big or Peter Florrick character that we all know him as, but just sort of hamming himself right up as he does it. You got Beryl Reid as the starship captain in Earthshock. You've got Hale and Pace enjoying themselves running a corner shop in Survival. I love stuff like that. And the example I'm going to go with of that phenomenon from this particular episode is when John Simm goes, you see through my clever disguise. It's just, he's played, he never really took the master seriously, did he? But, he's still sort of enjoying not taking him seriously in a whole new way. And it means that even at this darkest moment of the episode, it's just really joyous.
I love Simm's contribution to the whole episode. And in fact, for me, John Simm's master gets better every time he comes back. I have some reservations about some of what goes on, particularly in Utopia, but also in some aspects of Last of the Time Lords and Sound of Drums. Less now than I had at the time, actually, because I think he's terrific. I do think he's terrific in it. But the sort of giddy, and I can see. Look, let's talk about that when we do those episodes. And I could see exactly the rationale behind it. Is that he's supposed to be the other side of the coin of David Tennant's, sort of slightly ratty, enthusiastic, chirpy, bouncy doctor. He's an equally sort of effervescent, scampish jackanapes. But then when he comes back in the end of time and he's sort of feral and of the streets, I thought that suited that characterization much more, and John Simm's performance much more. I bought him much more as the sort of the feral, slightly damaged psychopath than I did the sort of absurd politician, if you like. But then here, I think he does the disguise really well, and he balances the sort of the fact that he's got the accent and the heavy disguise, but he is slightly winking to the audience, but he's also within the setup, and the rapport that he has with Bill is sort of rather truthful and rather sweet, and has a sweet undercurrent to it, which he then throws away and go to reveal that actually no, he was a meanie all the time. And the fact that he's got the dark beard, which means that again we've got this familiar actor playing this character, but he's presenting himself to us in a slightly different way. And then teaming up with, and I thought when you said about actors having fun, because Michelle Gomez is clearly having fun. And it's a dangerous line to tread, because you never want to watch somebody who's having fun but forgetting that you'd like to have some too. You never want to watch somebody who's having fun at the expense of the drama. You never want to see a performance that is too self-indulgent. But I don't think either of these performances are. I think they absolutely have the requisite level of fun to make us enjoy it, and it's that peculiar synthesis that Doctor Who has between the enjoyable and the silly, and the deeply terrifying and utterly scary, and the outrageous and the contrived and the absolutely plausible and absolutely real, and that takes deft judgment in terms of tone and performance style, and I think. And we'll see it next week. I mean, I'm preempting, but I'm going to love everything about the Master and Missy double act of next week, and it's a genius idea. And I had to hold back this week from not going, oh, but I love that bit as well, because I know that it's going to be it's going to feature big time in my discourse of next time's episode. But yeah, I think John Simm is absolutely terrific in this episode and does the job that is required absolutely. And you say he doesn't take the Master seriously. I think he takes the Master absolutely seriously. But you can take something seriously, but not be po-faced about it. In the same way that I think Roger Delgado took the Master absolutely seriously, but he knew when to be funny. And I think there's there are real levels of damaged psychopathy in the Simm Master that also echo across to the Gomez Missy. But I didn't say that. I'm interesting. I hoped that because it's the stuff that's peculiar to this episode, the abstract institution, the silent movie. Hospital with all of its very visceral early medicine thing going on that is that brings with it ideas of quite primitive amputation and you imagine anybody with a wooden leg at that hospital would have had their previous one, sawn off, whilst undergoing great pain. It brings all that kind of additional baggage with it that just sits as an undercurrent underneath everything, underneath all of those visuals that then ties in so beautifully with those, Cybermen, primitive, but undeniably a Cyberman. I thought that was a terrific episode. I think it was all of the stuff that Stephen Moffat does well, done to its best, with all of its great assets. Those regulars, Michelle Gomez, Rachel Talalay, Michael Pickwoad, the art department, the lighting department, the Cybermen using, as I say, the very primitive, those keyboards, all of that, to just have one word repeating over and over again that becomes a sort of disturbing, weird, kind of unsettling catchphrase. It's a genius use of the ingredients that make Doctor Who work to give us something that is absolutely Doctor Who, and yet Doctor Who like we've never seen it before. I thought that was a terrific episode. I look forward to you joining me for something a bit more action-packed next week that will nonetheless have the funnies and the scaries and the saddies. And so I look forward to you joining me and John next time. But there is not world enough and time for me to go into any more detail about this, because time is, as we know, limited and precious. And for this podcast, at least, it has run out.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
Oh, and this is a very good I think you'll find. So I'm adding this post-original release and edit, etc., because I've been talking to John, and in so doing got him to record a plug for his book that you will have heard at the top of the show, that also wasn't in the original edit that went out to patrons, but don't mind rejigging, and I'm taking that opportunity so to add John's plug for his book to the beginning of the programme. To the end of the programme, something that he mentioned, of course, about the poem World Enough and Time. I mean, I think I mentioned the title, didn't I? But it's to his coy mistress being Missy. So there is some provenance for that beyond it just being a useful line for the episode. It alludes to the glorious Missy, and I said to John that I would acknowledge that he had pointed that out, and he said he thought that observation came from Jim Smith, another very erudite commentator from the worlds of Doctor Who. So, Jim, if that was you that pointed it out to John pointed it out to me, and I'm now pointing it out to them. Some of them may have known, and I know that some of them are you, because Jim Smith listens to this, so it's all come full circle. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Jonn Elledge, who you can find on Twitter at Jonn Elledge. The John is unusual. It's Jonn, and then Elledge, Elledge, at Jonn Elledge. I'm grateful to John, who will be joining me for the next episode as well, and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Sydney Wilson, David James Wilson, Andrew Willis, Reese Williams, Michael Williams, Tom White, Stephen White, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Sabrina Tirabassi, Damien Timmer, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Stephen, all small case no surname Stephen, David Shepherdson, Graham Slate, Keith Say, Jim Sangster, Mark Sandham, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Scott Pride, Kevin Parker, Jonathan Potter, and Melvin Pena. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits of one of these podcasts, well, that's one of the perks of being a patron of them and me. Blah, it's horrible, isn't it? But anyway, it's the way we do things these days. You can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, and for as little as £3 a month, you can get advance releases, bonus material, exclusives, behind the scenes of DVD commentary shoots, photographs, interviews, and, as I say, all of this stuff much earlier than if you're listening to it now, you could have listened to it then. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Everything is available at the lowest tier, which is £3 a month. And if you sign up for a year in one go, you get a 10% discount even on that. So it's not bad, because you tend to get about 3 releases a week, and that doesn't include pictures of my dog. They're currently over there on Patreon 3 episodes ahead on too much information just because I've just had a spurt, and will shortly be an episode ahead of Indefinable Magic, but I've got another couple of those getting together as well, and 6 months ahead pretty much with releases of Happy Times and Places. Plus, as I say, there are other things too. If you don't want to do a monthly subscription but still want to subsidise the arts in the way that they seem to be done now, it's not the arts though, is it? Subsidise people who want to talk for a living instead of lifting things up or learning a craft. Then you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. You don't get any perks at all, but it's just a one-off payment that disguises itself as a cup of coffee. Or you can just go to all of the places where these podcasts are available and part with no money at all, but give them a 5-star review and a few lines saying what you like about them, and that just really helps. So if you could do any of those things, I would be extremely grateful. But you know what? I am just happy that you're listening, and I hope you enjoy what it is that you're listening to, and thanks for so doing. Okie doke, here's all the social media stuff. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Toby.Hadoke, and I've got a Facebook page as well. So please follow all of those bits and bobs. There's videos and words. Now, therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may, and now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour, than languish in this slow-chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run.